Welcome back to the Wirex Podcast. I'm your host, Lianna Adams. Today, we're putting the system on trial, exploring law, corruption, and the cost of control in the world of crypto. Joining us is Gordon Einstein, founder of CryptoLaw Partners and co-founder of Tech Tuesdays. Gordon, it's great to have you here.
I'm very honored that you're having me on the show, and I'm excited for the podcast. Thank you so much.
Amazing. Yeah, maybe we could start with a bit of your background, how you got involved in law, technology, and crypto.
Sure. So law was, let's put it this way. I was a frustrated computer science major in college. I didn't think I could do it because I didn't have a math background. I was laboring under the illusion that you needed to be good in math to be a computer science person, which I since found out was not correct. So when I graduated with my degree in politics and German, I was like, well, that's pretty useless. What can I do? And of course, as being useless, I went to law school. The idea was I was going to start a business, and I thought that everyone kept on saying a law degree was just as good as an MBA, which I don't know if that's true or not true. Anyways, I ended up actually sort of liking it. Practiced for several years, and paused to start my own technology company. I discovered blockchain and crypto in 2014, and then pivoted back into law because I thought there was a possibility there for blockchain-enabled law to make the world a lot better. So I'm one of those extremely rare lawyers who left law and then went back into law, and it was all motivated by crypto.
Wow, that's amazing. So let's go back in time a little bit, right? Like when crypto first appeared, it promised freedom from the system. Do you think it's actually created a new one instead?
Save the last part of the question. The premise was we create freedom, and then what was the last part of the question?
Yeah, so do you think it's actually created a new one instead, like a new system?
Sure. Everything that works at scale on a repeated basis is in some ways a system, right? The question is whether the system is mandatory, oppressive, useful, all these adjectives or adverbs we can tack onto it. It certainly has undermined or destabilized, whatever word you want to use, the traditional finance system. It's destabilized traditional banking. And the premise of it was the decentralization of power and the removal or minimization of rent-seeking behavior by intermediaries. That was sort of the ideology behind it. And the network structure of it reflected that ideology. Some of that has come to pass. When you have cryptocurrencies such as Bitcoin or USDT or USDC, or Ethereum, you can directly pass them between users, between wallets. So we can now do value transfer at a distance without an intermediary. That's if you want to destabilize the old TradFi system, so to speak, that's a good way of doing it. It also potentially, and maybe in actuality, is leading into new forms of control or even a diminishment of privacy because, if I hand you $100 and borrowing a video, there's no trace of what happened. It might as well not have happened. But every transaction on the blockchain is recorded. Right. So if actual identities can be assigned to those blockchain identities, then you have this unerasable record of what's transpired, and that can be good and that can be bad. So it cuts both ways. I think on the whole, the technology is like any other technology. It can be used neutrally or negatively or positively or some blend. But I think on the whole, blockchain tends to have good uses, but we shouldn't be blind to certain aspects of it as well.
Yeah, I totally agree. And someone once told me that people don't really want freedom. They just want better masters, right? I don't know whether you you agree with that statement or not. And it comes down to so is regulation there to protect people, or, is it to keep control over them when it comes to crypto, right? So, yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
So people tend to think in binary, this or that, 1 or 0, light or dark, whatever. Usually it's a blend of this and that,
Yeah.
that and that to various degrees. Sometimes when you make one of those elements stronger, by definition, it kind of weakens or dilutes the others. But life is complex, so it's extremely rare that any complex phenomenon involving a lot of people, especially when there's money or value involved, is just one thing. The response to COVID wasn't just one thing. The monetary system isn't just one thing. The competition from China isn't just one thing. It's a millions and billions of actors with their own intentions, negotiating through words and through action and through signaling, and you get the ever-changing result of that matrix. So, is regulation good or bad? Regulation is like technology. It can be used for many things. If we're regulating to prevent crime and crimes we agree are not okay, such as murder for hire, then it's great. If it's acting as a means of surveillance and intimidation and destroying privacy, then in my opinion, it's not so great. But there's some people I don't want to have privacy. I don't want terrorists to have privacy. In my mind, they should have zero privacy. I want to know what they're doing and stop it. But of course, once you start thinking that way, you can go too broad with that and start bringing in people who don't deserve to have their privacy invaded. So once you look at life in all of its vast complexity, you realize that nothing's going to be perfect for every situation. And you look at the intentions of the people involved, what they're really trying to accomplish, kind of read between the lines, and you try to push things in whatever direction you can according to your own ethics and morals and interests. I'll point out that there's legislation and regulation, which is human-made law, sure, but there's a law in a sense of code, and the code of what lets you transfer value on Ethereum, or the code of how many new Bitcoin get minted every certain period. And if that code isn't changeable by humans, on one hand, it's extremely reliable. On the other hand, it may not be great, because life changes, life shifts, life steps. You really want things to be exactly the way they are 100 years from now. What if it's outdated? Are we trapped forever? So, it's a tough one. It's kind of the fun and the challenge and the frustration and the opportunity with this area.
Yeah, I really love what you've said, and what you said about intentions as well, right? Because Winston Churchill once said, like, all road the road to hell is yeah, exactly. you know, cri- yeah, so crypto is supposed to be transparent. Yet we've seen scandals like FTX. Does transparency really prevent corruption? Or is it a paradox?
So Justice Louis Brandeis, who was on the Supreme Court, once said, "Sunlight is the best disinfectant." And obviously, I'm alluding to what you're saying. The visibility of actions leads to better behavior. There's a reason why a lot of crimes get committed in the dark and at night. So when there's more awareness and more surveillance or more public audibility, whatever, you tend to get better behavior just because you get attribution, who's doing things and you know what they're doing, and the evidence is easier to collect. So in general, that's an argument for transparency / surveillance. And surveillance isn't necessarily wrong. If I'm at home and I got a babysitter watching my kid, maybe I want some surveillance. But again, that's one of those analogies that you can run a train through, because then you can kind of rationalize all sorts of things. What about adults on the street? Once you establish a principle for the most vulnerable in society, people will take advantage of that principle and expand it maybe beyond what we're comfortable with if you're libertarian. I don't know if crypto, like I said, increases transparency in the sense that everything's on the blockchain.
Yeah.
And but maybe not much more than that. You have a record of transactions, but you don't necessarily know who are doing the transactions or if the transactions are right or fair. Plus, there's mixers and tumblers and all these other things that can distort or obscure what's really going on. But if you look at things like FTX, that wasn't a flaw in crypto. That was a flaw in a human legal organization holding crypto and acting a certain way with that crypto and with their marketing. That wasn't an issue with crypto per se. That's maybe a violation of the ethos of the industry, but it's not a technical or systemic issue with crypto itself.
Yeah, that's a really good way of putting it, and I suppose people will be peopling, right?
People will be peopling this.
So do you think people can stay anonymous and still be held accountable, in a decentralized world? I mean, I've often wondered about this, right? Because when we want to hold people accountable, but we don't really know who they are, how do we do that,
So there's, to hold them physically accountable in the sense of suing them or putting them in jail or
Hmm.
punching them in the nose. No, I mean, if you don't know who someone is, you can't hold them accountable in that world. But if to the extent that their assets are on the blockchain, then you
Mm.
can hold them accountable in some senses. For example, when you have a proof of stake network like Ethereum, okay, and you have validators, and they're basically using their stake as a bond to to back up their actions as network validators and the truthfulness of it. If they violate their duty, then their stake can get slashed. That's the term, right? They can lose some or all of what they've staked. So there you can engineer incentives within the system, even a blockchain anonymous system, so that people are incented to behave. With Bitcoin, the incentive is not to try to cheat the system because the amount of computing power involved for quantum is
Right.
ridiculous, and you might as well just make money, either play by the rules or make money through mining. So within a system, anonymous or not, you can impose consequences. But if I don't, it's so hard right now with forget crypto, just cyber in general. You never know who's really attacking you online. Is it really that IP address? Is someone doing a false flag? Is it going through a million proxies? What's actually happening? So it causes irresponsible behavior. When you see it in social media, when people can post anonymously using avatars and fake names, and you can't find out who it is,
Yeah.
all kinds of id and bad things coming out of their mouths that if you were looking them in the face, they wouldn't say. They wouldn't say because they're afraid of it, and they wouldn't say it because the social convention's allowed, and maybe they don't even really believe it. But when they're online, there's that famous New Yorker cartoon. Like, there's two New Yorker cartoons. The first one was on the internet, no one knows you're a dog. That was the first one.
Mhm.
And then the second one was on the internet, everyone knows you're a dog, which is kind of, captures the duality of that experience.
Yeah, and I feel like, we are living in the golden era of paradoxes, uh,
Yeah.
because it's almost like everything, like there's that duality of it, right? And it comes down to trust. How can we know who to trust when trustless systems still depend on humans to build them and run them, and with humans, people will be peopling.
People will be peopling. So there depends how you're using the word trust and trustless. So
Hmm.
trustless, as I normally take it, means that you don't need to trust
Yeah.
because the trust is systemic or the system is reliable. For example, very sophisticated encryption that can't be broken out with quantum. I say, you can say you trust it, but that's kind of the wrong word for it. It's more like it doesn't require trust. You can mathematically prove that it's secure in a way that you can't do with a human or system or a bank or the Federal Reserve or anything else. So to the extent we can move to trustless systems, that's great. Where people, as you correctly point out, where they have an issue is when they need a trusted interface to that trusted solution. For example, if they have to trust FTX to get to that trustless or not trust requiring underlying crypto, then
Mm.
that's an attack vector. It's just like if you have your private key in your mind, sure, the private key is very hard to break cryptographically, but someone can threaten you or your family, put a gun to your head or whatever. So you have to, like any network, you only ask secure is your weakest link, and so you have to look at the blend of trust and trustless systems and just protect yourself.
Yeah, you've really explained that so well. Thank you so much for that. And it makes me think about the ethos behind crypto. And if crypto was meant to break power structures, why do a few big players still seem to hold, most of the influence?
Because, well, I think Satoshi famously made all these online posts and then put a line in the first block that was mined about the Bank of England bailing out, or doing another rescue. Sure, this is the ethos behind non-governmental digital currency to destabilize these power structures, but the code doesn't know about your intentions, right? The code is
Mm.
just the code. And so you can try to design something that furthers your intentions, But once you release it, it's like a virus. You can genetically engineer a virus or even a medicine, but it doesn't know what you intend for it to do. Just like artificial intelligence
Yeah.
doesn't really know what we want it to do. It just does what it does. So anything, once you release something and once it has value, you can have, as smart as you are, you can have all these other smart people, basically hackers in the real sense of the word, not people who use things in unexpected ways. You can have them banging on these things and using them also in combinations you didn't anticipate. You can't foresee everything. So I think with crypto, there's a tendency towards decentralization and
Mm.
freedom, but the code the code is not self-adjusting to be like, oh wait, someone just exploited me in a way that re-centralizes. I need to fix myself. It doesn't know. It's not aware of the outside world. It's just running what it runs.
Yeah, that's a
And
great point.
to change it, you need humans to update it, and getting those aligned and communicating and making a decision, especially when it's decentralized, is very difficult, as we saw with Bitcoin.
Yeah, so do you think it's possible then to build a fair and ethical system on technology that doesn't have morals?
So that's the alignment issue, right? So
Yeah.
either this thing is a glorified automaton, meaning it's just a bunch of if-then statements that react to its environment in predictable ways. Well, that's a very simplistic thing, but it doesn't. It's reliable, but it's not going to adapt to different or novel situations. It's not going to perceive nuance. It's like a soda dispenser. You put in the money, you push this button, out comes this thing. That's reliable for the most part, but it won't adapt. When you start getting into these complex systems, you either need to get humans involved at some level, in which case you're kind of back with the original problem of, how do you control discretion and incentives and corruption?
Mm.
Or this is tricky, or you need to have some kind of reliable, ethical AI that manages it. But that opens up all other kinds of problems, because it starts
There's another can of worms.
it's kind of worms that's open today, which is, how do we solve the alignment problem? How do we stay
Yeah.
aligned over a long period of time? What, you can have ethics from 2,000 years ago that were completely ethical, and today they're not. I mean, if you look at I'll get a little bit controversial. If you look at the original Bible, there's it talks about slavery. Okay, is that okay now? Do you want an AI based on those principles, or do you want an AI that's modernized? And of course, the moment you give it the opportunity to change with the times, maybe it changes in a direction you don't want. So in my opinion, you moved the problem around. You didn't solve it.
Yeah. So, I mean, it brings me to my next question, right? Because you said like it just moved things around and didn't really solve it. Do you think decentralization can remove corruption, or do you think it's just gonna, move around in new ways?
So I don't want to sound nihilistic about it. Better systems and better people tend to produce
Yeah.
better results. So when you have good people operating within a good system, which by the way I think we have in the UAE, you tend to get good results. Tend to get less corruption, not no corruption, but less corruption. Okay, so a lot of it is character, society, personal ethics, everything else. A lot of it is system design. You can have great people in a bad system, and we see this in a lot of other countries. Good human beings caught in a bad system, and their attempts at goodness are stymied. And sometimes they could become the victim to the bad. And sometimes you have bad people in a good system. Well, you can't save it because, these systems aren't that smart. They can't resist the concentrated effort of bad people to undermine them. And, heaven forbid you have bad people in a bad system, though that might actually be good. Then they just consume themselves and don't hurt you. So I think it's like everything else, it's a blend. I think for humans, you need people of good character who are savvy. They can't be innocent of the world. You need people with, who are capable and have the right ethics, but also have the right operator mentality. So they understand what the world presents, both good and bad. Working within good systems that good in the sense of well-designed and good in the sense of ethically good systems, then you can start minimizing stuff. And I think, to answer your question, I think decentralization and crypto has a role to play in this. That's why I went back into the field of law. But again, you're dealing with billions of humans with different incentives, plus natural systems interacting with each other over time in a changing environment. We shouldn't underestimate the task of making good results. And I'm always very impressed when someone operates in this world and they produce good results. It takes a lot, but it's the only world we got, so we need to do it.
So how do you think we can balance it, with the system as well as our human need to control things? And with humans, we there will be weaknesses, right? Because we're more susceptible to like corruption, and especially when there's inequality and insecurity all around, right?
So it's kind of what I was just saying before. There's the human side and then there's the system side.
Yeah.
German word called Ausbildung, which roughly translates to character education. And so in the 19th century, there's a whole class of literature about, usually a young man, usually a youth, who leaves his home, goes out in the world, goes through all these adventures, gets stolen from, falls in love, does this, he fights in a war, does this, does that, and sort of grows as a result. You can look at the Count of Monte Cristo, which is sort of about the same idea. You have a very innocent person, very naive person who gets manipulated and put in jail, and then he finds a tutor there and develops how to fight, develops his mind, and then comes back and, becomes a powerful operator for justice. So, that's a good person in a bad system. That's why I mean, you need to have people human beings that are ethically strong, not just innocent, but ethically strong, who are capable of not being victims. So they need a certain amount of savvy and understanding. That's the human side. The other side is they need to band together and intelligently design good systems. That's how you don't eliminate corruption, but you minimize it, catch it, punish it. And to take a look at Singapore, you have able, in my opinion, morally good administrators operating in a good system that they've created. So is it perfect? No. But does it get generally positive results? Yes.
Yeah, it's so interesting. The word British.
Strive for.
Yeah, it's just I love the way you've just broken it down, right? Like how with good people it could be a bad system, but the outcome is still relatively good, right? So yeah, it's fascinating.
Pockets of goodness. So if you have a bad system but good people, you'll get pockets of goodness, but you'll have systemic problems that grind everyone down. So it's not enough to be good. And it's not enough. You need good people who can work together and confront those systems in a way that's effective. And that's asking a lot of people. So we need to.
Do you think it's asking a lot of people?
I think, it's not asking. I don't mean asking a lot in the sense of imposing on them. I'm saying that there's a little bit of we're just very philosophical here, but there's a little bit in a contradiction. If you're ethically good, acting in a savvy, streetwise manner, they're a little bit in conflict. But right, because the people who are ethically solid don't naturally think in those terms. They usually have to have some life experience that opens up their eyes. They can use the expression that they get mugged by reality, and then some of them will react to that by saying, look, I want to keep my essential goodness, but I want to be aware of how the world works. When you make that not by chance, not by getting mugged by reality, but you make it actually part of character education, which we don't really do too much in the West, unfortunately, then you can kind of create situationally aware good people. Then it's not asking them too much. Then they're they have the intentions and the tools. And when they band together to create good things, they're effective.
Yeah, that's really amazing the way you've broken it down. And, I do have to ask you one question. Are you Satoshi? Are you Satoshi?
My wife would like me to be, but no, I'm not.
Gordon, thank you so much for joining us and for sharing your insights into how law and crypto continue to collide and evolve. So great to have you. Thank you so much.
Interesting conversation.
And to our listeners, thanks for tuning in to the Wirex Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to follow, share, and keep the conversation going.